Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This is the continuation of Reformation. This will be Part 9, Chapters 12 and 13. Chapter 12. You got all our stuff to the rendezvous point? Toga asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as she and Deku crouched together in a door frame. According to Deku's calculations, which were rarely wrong, they were perfectly placed out of view of any cameras. Deku nodded. All my computer gear, your knives, and 3 pieces of clothing between the two of us are all in there. I hid them pretty well, so no one should find them. Are you sure you want in on this? There's no turning back, you know. Shigaraki will eventually find out. You saw what happened to that girl. We can't just leave her here. And if Shigaraki knew about Eri and what she could be used for, I don't think he'd be much nicer to her. Deku frowned, but nodded. You're right. I'm sorry, Toga. I know that the League is your family. She shook her head. You and Magne are my family. If you think this is the right thing to do, then we'll do it. Besides, if Shiggy found out that you helped Eri, he'd hurt you. And then I'd have to hurt him, and I'd get kicked out of the League anyway, so this is better. Now, remember, we only have 15 minutes max before my time runs out after I drink the blood. You have to be ready, okay, Deku-kun? Got it. Let's do this, then. Toga picked up the small water bottle and untwisted the cap. Deku grimaced slightly, watching the gauze float around inside of the bloody water. They had known that if Toga had sucked the blood out of the gauze while it was still wet, then Toga would only have been able to be Eri for a few minutes during the day. What they needed was for her to be able to transform into Eri during the night, when most everybody was asleep. The blood would have dried out at that point, and they hadn't done enough tests yet with Toga's quirk to know if dry blood would work, so they did the only thing they could think of. They made blood-infused water. Shoving the gauze into a water bottle, they had watched as the water had turned a hazy shade of pink. Toga downed the entire bottle in one go, stopping only to poke a finger in, hook it onto the gauze, and yank it out to squeeze the last drops into her mouth. Looking away, Deku waited for Toga to take off her clothes and transform into Eri. After a moment, Toga, who now looked exactly like Eri, poked him and handed him the bundle of her clothes. He took the clothes and then pulled his phone from his pocket. With a few quick taps, all the cameras in the Yakuza base went down, along with all other security measures, including the high-tech locks on Eri's door. Meet you soon, Deku said before hurrying away, leaving Toga to her part of the plan. Toga scurried off toward where she knew a guard would be, following the path she and Deku had mapped earlier. Letting the guard spot her, she let him chase her, shrieking and crying the whole way. Other guards and thugs were startled awake by the noise, coming out of their rooms to investigate. They were all too drowsy and disoriented to notice a small girl dodging through their legs. They were awake enough to notice when the first guard had crashed into them full force, sending them all sprawling. This, of course, started multiple arguments, which led to at least 3 different fistfights breaking out. Toga giggled quietly, as she had slipped into the vent that she and Deku had unlocked for her earlier. From there, just a matter of climbing through the ducts until she got out of the building. Meanwhile, Deku was sprinting toward Eri's room. Just as he turned into the hall with her room, a lab door opened, revealing Overhaul. Scrambling, Deku ducked back around the corner, his breathing erratic. Overhaul manually locked the door behind him before he calmly walked down the hall away from Deku, yawning. He'd finished making the 5th bullet. As soon as Overhaul's footsteps had receded, Deku poked his head back around the corner, seeing that the coast was clear. He hurried over to the door that Overhaul had just exited from. He paused, wondering if this was the right thing to do. He and Toga hadn't planned for this, but it was the perfect opportunity. With a final grimace, Deku used one of his gauntlets and sprayed a little acid around the lock. Once it had eaten through the metal, he opened the door and slipped inside. Without hesitation, he picked the small box that held the bullets. Peeking inside, he confirmed all 5 were there. Deku glanced around the room, wondering if he had time to destroy all of Overhaul's research. After a brief hesitation, Deku pulled out a flash drive from his pocket, plugged it into a nearby computer. A few keystrokes later, the entirety of the computer's contents had been copied to the flash drive and deleted from the computer's hard drive. He pocketed the flash drive and then turned his attention on all the papers that littered the lab. It took only seconds for Deku to use his gauntlet to set them on fire. He hurried from the room and opened Eri's door, flooding the dark room with the light from the hall. Eri looked up from where she'd laid on the bed, her bleary eyes turning sharp and fearful as soon as she saw him. Deku closed the door behind him and slowly took his hood down. Then he pulled his mask off, allowing her to see his face. He smiled at her, his dimples flashing on his freckled cheeks. Hi, Eri. I know you don't really know me, and I know this is scary, but I'm here to help you. I need you to be a brave girl and come with me. Do you think you can do that? She sat up in her bed, clutching the thin blanket to her chest. She shook like a leaf, though Deku couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from fear. Overhaul said I'm bad. I'm cursed. He's the only one who can help me. Deku frowned. Has he ever lied to you, Eri? About anything? Slowly she nodded. He would tell me it wasn't going to hurt, but then it would hurt really bad. He'd cut me sometimes, and sometimes he'd poke me with the needles. And one time he told me that I was going to get a really nice new bedroom if I was good for him. I tried really, really hard to be good. He said I did well, but then he didn't get me a new room. I bet there were other times when he lied too, huh? I think a lot of people have lied to you about a lot of things, Eri. But I promise you, I'm not lying. I'm here to help you because I can tell that Overhaul's hurting you. He's the bad one, not you. If you come with me, I can take you somewhere that is safe. You'll never have to see Overhaul again. How can you promise that, though? Eri asked. Overhaul said that he'd come for me. Well, I'm going to take you to some heroes. Some really good ones. They're strong and they can protect you from him. But we have to leave now, okay? Eri looked him over for a moment, her eyes calculating. Finally, she let go of the blanket and climbed from the bed, her bare feet patting on the cold floor. I want to leave with you, Mr. Deku. Shucking off his jacket, he wrapped it around her shoulders, leaving him in his t-shirt, cargo pants, and his gear. Eri took hold of the hoodie and pulled it tight around her small body, seeming to revel in the warmth of it. Putting his mask back on, Deku stooped down and opened his arms wide. Is it okay if I carry you? We need to move fast, and I worry about you hurting your feet since you aren't wearing shoes. When Eri nodded, Deku moved another step forward and scooped her up, holding her close to his chest. Holding onto the hoodie with one hand, she wrapped her other arm around the back of Deku's neck and buried her face into the side of his neck. He pulled the hood up over her bright, distinctive hair and left the room, praying that Eri would never have to come back to it ever again. Deku hurried through the hall, knowing there wasn't much time before the cameras came back on. He needed to be out of the building before that happened, or Overhaul would know that he was the one to steal Eri away. He was almost to the door when a knife sliced across his upper arm. Hissing in pain, Deku dodged to the side, wrapping his body protectively around Eri. As he twisted away, the knife flashed through the air again and came down on Deku's face, cutting him at his brow, and sending blood flooding down into his eye. Thankfully, Eri was still wrapped in his jacket, so when the knife glanced off of Deku's face, it didn't cut her. Finally distancing himself from the attacker, Deku turned and found himself facing some low-level, no-name Yakuza thug. The man's stance was horrible, his grip on the knife incorrect, but effective enough to get the job done. I'm not letting you steal what belongs to the boss, the man spat, glaring. Hand her over and I'll let you go. What are you hoping to accomplish here, dude? You honestly can't think that you can take me on, do you? I can take on some skinny brat. I'll take back the girl, and the boss will see how valuable I am. This is my ticket into the inner ring, so hand her over and I won't. He was cut off as Deku launched one of his extra bracer cartridges at his throat. While the man gagged, struggling to suck in air after having been struck, Deku activated the bracer with the gases, not really caring which one he sprayed the guy with. When the man swayed and collapsed to the ground unconscious, Deku found he was slightly disappointed. He'd kind of been hoping it was the hallucinogenic one. Deku didn't wait around, he just pulled Eri in closer to his chest and hurried out the door. A moment later, the camera set came back on within the base, showing hallways filled with chaos and a little girl's empty bedroom. When Deku and Eri got to the rendezvous point, they found Toga waiting for them, wearing a too large t-shirt and too small shorts. Do you have my clothes? Toga asked, hopping from foot to foot excitedly. Deku passed over the small bag and turned around, letting Toga change in private. As soon as she was done, she used one of her knives to slice the hem of her skirt and wrapped it around Deku's bleeding arm. Eri frowned at all the blood, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't want anyone to get hurt from me. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. This isn't your fault, okay? Deku said, giving her a little squeeze. You know, Toga said, still working to stop the bleeding from the cut on Deku's arm. It's a long walk to UA, and with you being hurt, it'll just make it even longer. That gives Overhaul too much of a chance to find us. Deku groaned. I know, you're right. We really don't have a choice about this, do we? Nope. Now, I know you said we can't ask Shiggy or Kurogiri for help. What about Twice? He'll blurt it out to Shigaraki, and Spinner's out too. He's way too loyal to Shigaraki not to rat us out. We need someone who will show up and not tell Shigaraki where they're going. We only have one option here, and it's not great. You mean Dabi? I guess we could call him, but I don't really see him helping us just to be nice. That's not really his style, Toga said, finally tying off the scrap of cloth. He'll do anything for a price, and I definitely have something he'll want. Call him. Within 15 minutes, Dabi was pulling up in a trash beater, the engine sputtering and hissing. Leaning out of the broken window, he gave them all an unimpressed look. Eri burrowed further into Deku's chest, her whole body quaking. Toga said you'd pay for my help. Dabi drawled. What's the offer? Pushing a hand into his pocket, Deku pulled out the small box he'd stolen from Overhaul's lab. Here's the deal. I can tell you some information about Endeavor as a thanks for driving out here to listen to us. You can then go on your way and pretend you never saw us. Or I can give you something that is in this box that you can use against Endeavor. To get it, you have to drive us as close to UA as you can safely get. I would suggest you not tell Shigaraki you helped us if you value your life, and we'll make sure the heroes don't let slip that you helped us. You also have to swear to not tell Shigaraki anything about Eri and her quirk. So, which option are you taking? Dabi carefully eyed the box in Deku's hand, feigning disinterest, as he always did, but showing a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Whatever you've got there, is it good? How bad will it mess with Endeavor? Toga stepped up, smiling. It'll completely end his career. He'll never be a hero again, and with how bad it is, it'll probably be worse than death in his eyes. Without hesitation, Dabi unlocked the car doors. Toga climbed in first, took Eri from Deku, settling the small girl into the seat beside her. With some struggling, Deku climbed into the passenger seat in the front, sitting himself beside Dabi. Opening the box, Deku fished out one of the bullets and held it out to Dabi. This is a quirk-destroying bullet. Shoot Endeavor with this and he'll never be able to use his flames again. There is technically an antidote, but it was being produced by the Yakuza. With the way it's made, the other heroes will refuse to let Endeavor have it. How's it made? From me, Eri said from the back seat. Overhaul would take me apart and then put me back together, but he'd keep some of me for himself. Then he'd make it into a bullet. He made a few of the blue bullets, but they got used up for tests. He only has the red bullets right now. Dabi glanced back at the girl, his eyes scanning over her bandaged limbs and cataloging every single one of her scars. Slowly, he turned back to Deku and opened his hand, letting him drop the red bullet into his palm. We have a deal. Can't believe I'm helping you brats play hero. You better not tell anybody that I have this, got it? If you do, I'll find out and I'll make you regret it. Completely understandable. Now, could you please drive? I really think I'm losing more blood than I would like. Dabi dropped them off about a block from UA campus, pausing only enough to wave Deku closer to his window. Deku leaned in, frowning in confusion. Listen, kid. Shit is going to be hard. Most heroes are bastards. There's a couple of good ones at UA, which I'm sure you know. Talk to them. They're more likely to listen to you. Dabi said. His eyes were serious, more so than Deku had ever seen. I'm changing my number after this, just in case the heroes are able to get it out of you two, but this bullet's worth more than a car ride. If you need help, then find a computer and track me down. You're smart enough to do it. I won't meet up with you, since I can't trust that the heroes aren't using you, but I can tell you some information or something. Then we'll be even, got it? Deku nodded before patting the side of the car. Dabi gave him one last farewell, before peeling away from the curb and disappearing into the night. Toga carried Eri the rest of the way to UA while Deku kept pressure on his wounded arm, only stumbling twice. At the gates, Deku used a small pair of pliers to open up the control panel and manually rewired the gates to open, letting them onto the campus. Standing on just the other side of the gate was Principal Nezu, a serene smile on his face. Hello. Please come in. Let's talk in my office. I believe we have much to discuss. Dabi held the small red bullet between two fingers, turning it back and forth, watching the light move across its smooth surface. He wasn't thrilled about Deku and Toga running off to the heroes. It wasn't a complete surprise that Deku ditched the League. Dabi saw that coming from day one. Toga leaving was a surprise, and it was definitely a shock that the two were skipping out to work with the heroes. But Dabi also knew what it was like to be driven by pain. The two teens had been driven by abuse and suffering to join the villains, working in the underbelly of society to create a better future. And now, they were being driven by the pain of losing Magne, who they had both been close to, and the pain of seeing such a young child in need of help. He understood why they wanted to help her. They saw themselves in her. They wanted to be the person that they wished had saved them. Hell, Dabi had felt the same thing the first time he'd met the teens. He had seen his own pain reflected in them, and he'd been drawn to it. It was too late for him. He knew that. But it wasn't too late for them. They hadn't done the things he had. In a way, it was nice to see someone finally break the cycle. It was nice to see people escape from their abusers. After all, when Toga and Deku joined the League, they hadn't truly escaped abuse, no. They had just traded one set of abusers for another. They just traded for Shigaraki and his mysterious sensei. Good for you, kids, Dabi whispered into the night, pocketing the bullet and looking down on the dark, empty street from his window. Good for you. Chapter 13. So you're telling me that these two kids, who are members of the League of Villains, stole this girl and these quirk-destroying bullets from the Yakuza? Vlad King said, eyeing Deku and Toga carefully. Toga was smiling at him, stars in her eyes. She had been doing that ever since he'd stepped into the room, her hand fisted tightly in Deku's sleeve. Recovery Girl had come in with Vlad King, shuffling along and grumbling about the hour. She planted a kiss on Deku's cheek without question, closing his injuries. A white, shimmery scar was left behind, splitting his brow. The bags beneath his eyes had darkened, his eyelids drooping as he got tired from the energy drain. Recovery Girl had forced a handful of energy gummies at him before trying to get Eri to come with her to the clinic for a full checkup. The little girl had teared up, not wanting to leave her heroes, but with some prodding and promises from Deku that he would see her soon, she'd eventually agreed to go with Recovery Girl, still wrapped tightly in the black jacket. Overall, it had been a very confusing 15 minutes for Shinso. Deku, who had been staring down at his hands, looking nearly catatonic ever since Eri left, looked up at Vlad King and frowned. Technically, I wasn't part of the League of Villains. I'm a freelancer. Yet you live with the League and worked for them, Vlad scoffed. I hacked for them and did research and analysis in exchange for room and board. They kept me safe, that was our deal. I also worked for a broker when he found people who needed my skills. I got paid for that stuff. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. Want to tell us that broker's name? Not really, no. My knowledge is probably the only thing keeping me out of handcuffs right now, so I'm not about to hand everything over right away. Smart, Mike said, nodding. When he saw Aizawa shoot him a deadly glare, he gave him a shrug. Can't fault me for complimenting the kid. King-kun, what kind of blood is your favorite? Toga asked, nearly leaning out of her chair. Her grip on Deku's shirt was the only thing keeping her from tumbling to the ground. I mean, obviously human is the best, but it's so hard to get a bunch of at once. So when Shigi lets me drink blood, I usually just get whatever blood that I can. Pig is my favorite, but usually I can only get cow. Vlad King's mouth dropped open in shock, as did Mike's. Nezu, Shinso, and Aizawa were better at hiding it, but the widening of their eyes was an indication enough that they were startled. Shinso, not knowing Vlad very well, was shocked that Toga thought a pro-hero drank blood, while the teachers were all shocked that she knew Vlad King did. What? How? Vlad stuttered. Deku grabbed Toga's arm and pulled her back closer to him, sending an apologetic smile toward the startled hero. Sorry about that. I told her about how you liked blood too, and she's been really excited about it ever since. Don't be surprised if she asks more questions. And how did you know, Deku? Nezu carefully asked, sipping at his tea. Well, it's sort of obvious, isn't it? Deku said, cocking his head, making Shinso think of a sweet, curious little puppy. I mean, he has a blood quirk. A strong one at that. Most people with blood quirks have some sort of affinity for blood. With its fangs, it's obvious that he would have an interest in the taste of blood. Most people with a blood quirk who like drinking blood have a mutation to their mouth. It's like the main signifier for it. Like Stain. He had the tongue. Toga has to drink blood for hers, as you guys know, but she also needs it for her health. I think she might also be anemic, but I can't be sure. Wait, how do you know about Stain's quirk? Deku turned his eyes on Aizawa. Oh, I hacked the camera feeds and watched the fight. Your students are really fucking stupid, did you know that? Nuh-uh, Toga giggled. You thought Todoroki made the right choice when we watched the fight with Spinny. Yeah, given his options he made the right choice, but he also shouldn't have been running into a fight like that with no plan or information. The dumbest one was the kid that went after Stain alone. He's the real dumbass. Right, the Ingenium knockoff. Ida? Shinso blurted out, not thinking. He's one of the smartest guys in our class. Deku fixed his green eyes on Shinso and gave him a lopsided grin. Ida? So he is related to Ingenium. Oh, it all makes sense now. Shinso went to speak again, but stopped when Aizawa's hand came down on his shoulder. Looking up at his mentor, he saw that Aizawa was giving him a look that Shinso had seen 1,000,000 times before. Aizawa wanted him to keep his mouth shut. Deku's grin only grew. Are you two related? You both got mental-based quirks, similar builds, and similar facial features. The hair is pretty different, though, and the activation for your quirk is pretty different, too, so maybe not. Distant cousins. You do have a voice quirk, though, so maybe you're actually related to President Mike. Sort of doubt that, though. You guys look nothing alike. Toga elbowed him. You're rambling again, Deku-kun. Oh, sorry, Deku said, a blush creeping up his face, to his ears, making him look impossibly cuter. I can't help myself sometimes. An analysis quirk. Should have guessed, Vlad King said. He folded his arms and leaned back in his seat. Incorrect, Nezu said. He poured 2 more cups of tea and pushed them toward the young criminals. After a moment's hesitation, he poured another and passed it to Shinso, seemingly deciding that all the children needed caffeine and comfort. Deku's eyes went wide as he stared at Nezu, not touching the tea. So, you know. Nezu nodded. I knew as soon as I saw you. For the first time since Shinso had seen her, Toga lost her smile. She grabbed hold of Deku with both hands and bared her teeth at Nezu, clearly threatening him. Deku-kun is amazing, and if you try to hurt him, I will... Oh, I have no intention of hurting him. You have nothing to worry about, my dear. I have no intention of hurting either of you. In fact, I plan to offer you both a place here at my school. That caught everyone's attention. You can't be serious, Aizawa snapped. She tried to kill my students. And mine, Vlad snarled. I wasn't going to kill anybody, I just needed some blood. Nezu raised a paw, signaling for silence. These two risked everything. Their lives, their standing in the League, their home, all to do the right thing and save a little girl's life. Before you all arrived, they explained that Overhaul was planning to move their headquarters. They likely would have been gone before we arrived for the raid. Now that we know that they are planning to leave, we can attack while they're unstable. There will also be less risk now that there will be no civilians within the base. For a few years now, I've been pushing to have a villain rehabilitation program implemented here at UA. The Commission pushed back and would not approve, stating that it was too dangerous, that most villains had no interest to be rehabilitated, and there would be no stable villains young enough for the program to work, but now Deku and Toga have proven them wrong. With the right diet, and possibly medication, I believe Toga would be able to be an excellent candidate. Deku, with his brilliant mind, could easily see himself at the top of the class within months. There's been an open spot in 1A for some time, ever since young Mineta left after the USJ, and there is an opening in 1B now that Tsutonori has completed her study abroad. Toga and Deku will fill these vacancies. Wait, Toga said, looking mildly panicked. We'd be hero students? Am I even allowed? Deku asked. I mean, I thought it was against the rules. There is no rule against it. Who told you there was? Mike scoffed. Pretty sure there are rules against kids with criminal records being in the hero courses. I don't have a record. Neither does Toga. Deku gave Mike a smile that was somewhere between self-conscious and smug. We've never been arrested. Fine. Kids with warrants out for their arrests. None of you know my real name. And I don't suppose you'll be telling us that, will you? You know me so well already, Eraserhead. Nezu cleared his throat, catching everyone's attention. We, as heroes, have a duty to help those in need. Right now, that is Deku and Toga. If they were to return to the League, they could easily be punished for what they've done. They need UA's protection, and this is what we will do. If you're all uncomfortable with the idea of them being in the hero course, I will find another way to keep them safe, but I believe it will be an opportunity to show more diversity within our hero course, which I know is something you have been campaigning for, Eraserhead. It will also help the current students to learn that they need to learn an individual's full story before passing judgment. I believe it will also help Toga and Deku to learn to trust heroes again if they were to spend time with heroes in training. Additionally, it would be the safest place for them. If there was to be an attack, they would be better protected. And you also think that if we were to attack, the hero course kids would be better at protecting themselves. Deku chimed in. He didn't sound or look offended by this, he was just stating a fact. Nezu nodded, not at all ashamed. Precisely. I will be putting this to a vote, which is why I've gathered you all here. I wanted the input of both homeroom teachers, a student in the hero course, and a third teacher with less of a stake. This way we would have a more diverse voting pool. What if we don't want to be heroes? Toga asked. Then you'll be arrested and treated as any other criminal. Got it. Okay, do your voting thing. Now, there will be rules and safety measures put in place, Nezu said, addressing the teachers again. They wouldn't be given free rein. Obviously, I will be voting to include them in the hero course, since it is my idea. Vlad, what is your vote? Sighing, Vlad looked over at the two criminals. Deku had his eyes downcast, avoiding eye contact. There was a nervous energy to him that seemed disproportionate for a simple vote. Toga was flashing Vlad a wide smile, but was still tense and clinging to Deku. Fine. Let 'em join. If they step a toe out of line, we arrest them. Mike? I mean, they're kids. There's got to be a story there of why they thought they had to be villains. I say give them a shot. Aizawa? Aizawa gave a groan and closed his eyes. I'm going to go gray early. I just know it. I'm taking that as a yes. Shinso? All eyes were turned on him as he took a shaky breath. I don't know how everyone else is going to feel. It doesn't feel right that I'm the one that has to speak for both classes. Maybe we should have Ida or Kendo vote. They're the class reps. Nezu shook his head. I chose you to do the vote because you're aware of the case and have been on it from the start. We want your honest opinion, Shinso. If you say no, we'll just privately teach them. It won't be a problem. Do you understand? Shinso nodded before looking over at the villains. They weren't so different from him. Toga had a villain's quirk like him. Deku must have one too, since he seemed so scared of anyone knowing what his quirk was. One bad thing, one change in Shinso's life, could have been the big difference between him being a villain like these two or being a hero. Who was he to judge them? Yes, give them a chance. They deserve that much. Deku gave a shuddering sob and folded over on himself, leaning into Toga. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders in an attempt to comfort him. Everyone else besides Nezu looked startled at the reaction. Carefully, Mike stood up and picked up a box of tissues from Nezu's desk and slid them over to Deku. Toga grabbed a tissue and wiped Deku's face, smearing tears and blood across his cheeks. See? You can be a hero, Deku. He was wrong. They were all wrong. It's okay, you don't have to cry. But I can't. Deku hiccuped, unable to get a word out. You can, Nezu said, a smile on his face. We'll help you. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 13 of Reformation. Chapter 14 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying this fic. Let me know your thoughts and reactions so far. And as always, thank you so much for listening.